Jack was in Paris attending a conference on cabinet making. After the session was finished, he decided to have a coffee in one of the many pavement cafes along the Champs-Élysées. He hadn't been there long when a beautiful girl walked by, smiled at him, and sat down opposite. Unfortunately, she could not speak any English at all, so he took a pen and paper from his briefcase and drew a cup of coffee, followed by a question mark. She nodded and he ordered another cup. Later, he drew a taxi, and again she nodded, so they were soon sitting in a cab, touring the left bank and the sights of Paris. Towards evening, he drew a table with wine and food, and it wasn't long before they were enjoying a beautiful meal in one of the finest Parisian restaurants. As the meal came to an end, the girl took the pen from Jack and drew a 4-poster bed. "Why, that's amazing," he said. "How on earth did you know I was in the furniture business?" A woman gets onto the train and finds herself sitting opposite a very handsome, sexy man. She smiles at him, but gets no reaction. Surprised, she undoes the 2 top buttons of her blouse, revealing more than a little cleavage, hitches up her skirt to show a good deal of thigh, but still there is no reaction. By this time, feeling very angry and frustrated, she drops her knickers and straddles his face. "Ah," smiles the man, "I may be blind, but the smell tells me I've arrived at my stop. This must be Grimsby." On a walking holiday over Dartmoor, a man comes across a naked youth tied to a tree. "Oh, thank goodness you found me," exclaimed the youth. "I was out for a day's walk when I got attacked by 2 bastards who robbed me of everything I had and even took my clothes. It's been a bloody nightmare." The walker looked at the body and smiled. "It's just not your day, is it, son?" he said, unbuckling his trousers. A group of tourists were on a coach trip through California when the guide's voice came over the microphone. "If you look to your left, you'll see we're just passing the most famous warehouse in the West." "But why?" replied one of the sightseers. The train was very crowded as the woman traveled home from work. But as she peered through the mass of people, she was sure she could see her husband. Pushing her way through the crowds, she came up behind him and gave him a lip-smacking kiss on the back of his neck. To her dismay, when he turned around, she realized it wasn't her husband. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, feeling shocked and confused. "It's just that your head looks like my husband's behind." How can you tell if a motorcyclist is happy? By seeing all the insects on his teeth. 3 men get captured in the jungle by cannibals and are taken back to the big chief, who immediately gets out his willy and tells them that if their willies together can match his, then they will be set free. Now, the cannibal chief has a 22-inch donger, so the first man gets his out and it measures 11 inches. The second man reveals his and it's 9 inches. Only other 2 inches are needed, so the men are feeling quietly confident when the third man drops his trousers and produces a pathetic example of manhood. However, it just makes 2 inches, so the men are set free. Later on, back at camp, the first man says to his companions, "It's a good thing mine was 11 inches. It's lucky mine was 9 inches, says the second. And it's a bloody good thing I had an erection, answered the third. A blind man stood at the edge of the pavement, waiting to cross the road, when his guide dog weed all down the side of his leg. The man immediately took a biscuit from his pocket and gave it to the dog. An onlooker turned to him and said, "That's very good of you, considering he just soaked your leg." "Not really," replied the blind man. "I'm just finding out where his mouth is so that I can kick him in the balls." An old, smelly, drunken man gets on a bus and sits down next to a very refined middle-aged woman. She turns to him and says contemptuously, "My man, you're going straight to hell." He jumps up immediately and shouts to the conductor, "Fuck me, I'm on the wrong bus." A plane crashes in deepest, darkest Africa, and there are only 5 survivors, 4 men and 1 woman. It soon becomes obvious that they will never be rescued, so they decide to start a small community and make the most of what they will have. All goes well for a while, except that they all get sexually frustrated and eventually come to an agreement that the woman will spend 1 week with each man in turns. As it happens, this works very well until 3 years later the woman falls sick and dies. It turns out to be disastrous for the men. The first week proves difficult, and the second awful, the third horrifying, and the fourth so impossible that at the beginning of the 5th week, they bury her.